Ruthless Compassion is a podcast about how you can turn your emotional shit into fertilizer for success and see your darkest moments as opportunities to transform into a powerful kindness warrior. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review wherever you listen. Welcome, Johnathan Niziol, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Thanks, Marcia. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it very much. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation, and I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I always like to ask my guests when we start to introduce themselves and sort of give a little thumbnail about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am originally born and raised in Canada. I moved to Texas, where I am now, it was April 2019, so just over 4 years ago. And I've done quite a bit of traveling for work and stuff like that. I'm an international model. I invest in real estate, and I'm also a certified personal trainer. I've been in the fitness industry for pretty close to 14 years. Yeah, I'm a dog lover. She's over there, just sitting there watching me. I was born and raised on a farm in Canada, a 500-acre cattle farm. So I'm always a farm boy at heart, I always say. But yeah, I'm just down-to-earth guy. I love to play sports. That's a really big part of my life. It always has been throughout my life, and it still is now. Being from Canada, obviously, I'm a hockey player, and surprisingly, there's a pretty good hockey scene down here in Texas. So I play 4 times a week on 4 different teams, but it's my hobby and one of my passions. So yeah, that's just a quick brief, I guess, who I am.
All right. Well, that's all very interesting, but obviously, the fact that you were on a cow farm is not the reason why you're here today.
Oh,
So
definitely
let's
not.
talk about the reason why you're here today, because
For sure.
I mean, that's all very interesting, but it's not kind of my brand. So
Totally.
we're going to talk about your journey. So
Yep.
why don't you let us know, like, what brought you to where you are today, to the person you are today? Not so much the details, but the circumstances.
Yeah, so I always start out with the definitive day where my life changed was the day before my 21st birthday, when I got a call saying that my mother had passed away very unexpectedly and very suddenly and very tragically as well. And, being 20, turning 21, it's a very formative time of your life anyway. My mom and I were extremely close. She was my best friend, biggest supporter. I'm a big, very close to my family. My father thankfully lives in Texas now, so we can see each other more often. But that rocked my world just to the core, shook my life to the core. My life was over as I knew it. And I kind of had things together for a couple of years on the surface, but they were starting to really crumble. The other layers were really starting to crumble. First was the struggles with mental health that began. I was diagnosed with severe anxiety, clinical depression, panic disorder, self-harm. And that's been something I've dealt with my whole adult life, 2 decades of, dealing with that and learning how to manage and to understand it better and to learn my body and to learn my mind more. But I also leaned heavily into alcohol. And I always partied in college, and just college partying, maybe a little bit too much at times, but I could stop whenever I wanted to. But alcohol quickly became a necessity for me, and it was the idea of, well, if I drink 15 to 20 beers, my problems go away until I sober up, and then they all come rushing back, and then there are some new problems that arise from the way that I acted when I was under the influence. So I pretty soon became a non-functioning alcoholic. I spent about 3 years that way. And I got very lucky though, because when I was 25, I got a very severe case of acute pancreatitis. And that put me in the hospital for just under a month. I had to have 5 blood transfusions. I lost 60 pounds in that month. The first 2 weeks alone, I lost 40 pounds. And I was told by the doctors I almost died twice. I don't know the specific times, because I just remember being so sick and, them rushing around doing all kinds, but so that I came out of that. It was because of drinking. I came out of that, first of all, never wanted to touch alcohol again because of what I've been through. And actually a couple of weeks ago, I think, was the 16-year anniversary of when I went to the hospital. So it's been quite a while that I've been alcohol free, but that started my appreciation and my respect for our bodies and for fitness and health, and which we'll see kind of counterintuitive when I start telling a bit more of my story, but I've always tried to live by that, even though some of the directions that I've taken. I got sober. I was playing professional lacrosse and I tore my knee and had a career-ending injury. But I'm a big believer in, you know what, when one door closes, another one opens. And I was 26 at the time. Maybe it's time to close that chapter of my life. I've been a lacrosse player all my life, move on to something different. So that's when I began modeling, and I started modeling and had the opportunity to travel and to start to model internationally. And I'm still a model today. And I've lived some wonderful places, but I've had some not so wonderful experiences. The second place that I went for my stays, like I spent 6 months in South Africa, came home for 2 weeks, then went to Miami. And 2 days after I got to Miami, I was sent to a casting, and my agency told me that he's a big designer. If he likes you, he'll book you a lot, but he's notoriously creepy. And this is in 2010. So this is before the Me Too movement, and things were kind of like the Wild West out there. I think the world in general, but especially in modeling, when, it's not uncommon for you to walk into somewhere and someone be like, okay, now take your clothes off. And be like, okay. And then just strip down to your underwear. So long story short, I went to the casting and I was sexually assaulted by this designer on this casting. And it was so foreign to me because I've always been, I'm a larger guy. I was actually probably bigger than I am now. I have been in many physical altercations, whether it was for sports or, misplaced anger after my mom passed away, or just being young and, getting in bar fights, whatever. But in that moment when that was happening, I was just so shocked and at like, how dare you? And is this really happening? And then it kicked in my fight or flight, and okay, I should beat the heck out of this guy. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do that because I'll probably get charged with assault or attempted murder. Anyway, I just got out of there. And the feelings, the feelings that came with that, the feelings that I was still already feeling for my mom and having not resolved that, 2 weeks later, I started an 8-year battle with an eating disorder because I had already started to plant body dysmorphia into my life as a model, and seeing others, modeling internationally, modeling with some of the, higher models and whatever, just very successful models, and being like, well, hey, that, I'm guys to guy, like that guy's working a lot. I wonder why he's working. Like, maybe I should change my appearance to be a bit more like him. Maybe I'm carrying too much muscle or doing something. So I'd already kind of, and then with that happening, I needed an outlet and a distraction. So I always say that I was a functioning bulimic, whereas I would be very regimented about eating my healthy, 3 meals a day, or eating my healthy meals, taking my vitamins. But when I needed that outlet, or I needed that distraction, or I needed to really get rid of those feelings, I would go get, $100 worth of junk food and just pig out and then just regret it and then purge it. And that, like I said, that continued on for about 8 years. And that was quite a struggle for me. And then, us people being their own toughest critics. And then, like I said, being in that industry where, you are judged based on yourself. It's like you go to a casting, you don't get the job, and you're like, what's wrong with me? What is it about me that's wrong? Like, and it took me a long time to understand that, there's nothing wrong with you. It just, certain people fit certain roles, or, it could be the director didn't like red or orange shirts, whatever this is, whatever. There could just be like all kinds of reasons, but that took me years to learn that. And so throughout that time, I'm traveling, I'm kind of keeping it together, but I'm not, I'm putting things in little boxes, whereas I'm here, I'm distracted, I'm distracted by traveling, I'm distracted by relationships, I'm distracted by, what I need to, by the eating disorder. And I've got all these boxes tucked away. And then I decide, okay, I need to move back to Toronto to be closer to family and to, just put down roots. I wanted to start a fitness business. I wanted to get a dog, my little dog, Bailey. But then those boxes started to close in. these things started to fall off the shelves. And it was like, I didn't have that, that traveling distraction of going to a new city and setting up a new life and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. And they started to really just fall in on me. And then I turned to drugs, and I had a number of drug addictions. There were 4 substances that I was addicted to at different times. Marijuana was a really big one for me. And I know a lot of people say, oh, it's just weed and it's not addictive. And I'm here to say it almost ruined my life. It would ruin my relationships, ruin me financially. I couldn't function without it, like all those things. I started using Adderall because Adderall was a great way to focus and keep lean and all those things. And you could just get so much done, and you could really, but then you're exactly. And you're up for 4 days at a time. I'd be up for 4 days at a time. And just, and then there was also nitrous oxide, which is that inhalant where it's like, they call it like hippie crack because it's so addictive, and it's so short lived. And the final straw, slowly my body was telling me that these things weren't right for me. Like, I had instances with each one of them. I'd have the moments where I was just like, enough is enough. And I'd dump out the rest of my, marijuana in the toilet and flush it and be like, I'm done with this. And then 2 days later, I'd go back and buy some more. But I had an instance where it was starting to really turn on me, and it wasn't becoming a fun thing. And that's another thing I'll say too, is all of my addictions, I've always been very insular. I wasn't a partier. I wasn't like let's have a bunch of people around and get messed up. I was like, I'm gonna just like isolate myself and turn my phone off and just not deal with my feelings or the world. And I was really starting to have a lot of like anxiety with marijuana and stuff like that. And I ended up going to the hospital because I was having such a bad panic attack one night. So I was like, okay, I'm done with that stuff. So I had these moments where my body, I think the universe and my body were telling me like, you need to get rid of these things. And the one thing I'll give myself credit for is I always did the baseline drugs. Like I'd say, I mean, Adderall's not really basic, but for the most part, like the entry level stuff. But I would do it a lot in excess. Like if I smoked weed, I smoked like 2 ounces a week by myself. And if I would take Adderall, I'd be up for 4 days. And if I do nitrous, I'd get like 300 at a time and just sit there for hours and hours, just killing brain cells. So the final straw was a muscle relaxer, an over-the-counter muscle relaxer. And I had been taking them for a while because, I had some aches and pains from working out and from lacrosse and stuff like that. And it was just a generic version of a muscle relaxer that we have in Canada. And there was 500 milligrams of methocarbamol in it and 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. And I'd find like if I was smoking some weed and I'd take like, a couple of those, I'd be like, wow, I feel a little bit loose, like, hey, this is a little extra. Well, then when I put marijuana out of my life altogether, I was like, I guess I've got to go all in on these things. And that became my next thing. And our bodies are incredible with what they can handle with regards to tolerance, because I worked my way up to, in the span of a couple months, I worked my way up to taking 100 pills every single day. So I was taking 50,000 milligrams of methocarbamol and 20,000 milligrams of ibuprofen every single day, 7 days a week. Like I would go into the store, I'd buy the generic bottle. It was, I think, $38 and change. I would go home, I would just pour out a handful, like 30 or whatever, and then just take them in 100 a day. And I started to feel the effects of it, but I thought it could be anything else. And as addicts do, there's so many other reasonings and other ways to rationalize why your body's feeling the way it is or your mind's doing what it is, but it can't be your substance. That's the last thing you want to think, because you don't want to like admit that and admit that you have to give it up. So I was having fainting spells. I was, I had no energy. I was, constantly getting lightheaded when I'd sit down, stand up. My anxiety was through the roof because I thought, I'm going to be in the grocery store, I'm going to pass out and faint, or I'm going to be driving and I'm going to faint and hurt somebody. So I was having like just massive anxiety about that. And I finally got to the point. I remember I was doing a shoot and I was shooting a cover for a romance novel. I've done quite a few of those, and we were getting up off of this truck hood and going like back and forth. And every time I got down, I was like, I'm about to faint and like cause a scene. So that night I went home and I finally put two and two together, and I said, it's these pills. Like enough is enough. I had to. It's obviously these pills. So I didn't take them that night, and the next morning I was supposed to be going to a shoot, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just brushing my teeth, and my knees were buckling like they couldn't hold my weight. Like I was standing there, and I remember my knees hitting the counter over and over because they couldn't handle my weight. So I called my agency. I said, hey, I can't go to the shoot. I'm going to the ER. And it turns out that I had major internal bleeding from an ulcer.
I was
because
waiting
of
to hear about the internal bleeding because of the ibuprofen. Yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't see
Oh my
it.
gosh.
I wasn't passing blood when if I wasn't vomiting, I wasn't passing it through my urine or my stool. So I didn't see it. I was losing a massive amount of weight. Like I said, I was having all those other signs, but I didn't see it. And thankfully they put me on iron supplements, and that was the last time I took anything. But then that's when I decided, okay, you are 35 years old now, and you've been doing this for 15 years. You've had this plan for 15 years, and it's not working. These band-aids that I'm putting on, and they are not working. And for the longest time I held the stigma of, you know what, therapy's for wimps. I'm not going to sit there and pay somebody to judge me. I'm not going to sit there and have somebody just tell me what a loser I am, or all these things, or
'Cause that's what
I'm
we do
too.
in therapy, of course. That's how I treat my patients all the time.
Exactly, right. Or I'm too manly for it, and I'm like, but I said, you know what, this isn't working, and I'm going all in, because I need to talk to somebody. I got a great recommendation from a friend of mine, and I went full bore into it. And that's when the real darkness and the heavy lifting started, because all these boxes came down now, and I had nothing to numb me out, but I had somebody working with me to teach me the tools and to talk me through these things and to help me learn how to live as a functioning sober adult for the first time in my life. And it was weekly at the beginning. I needed more help. I was like, okay, I'll be there next week. I'll be there next week. And I'd be in my therapist's office, and just, my cortisol levels are rising, and I'm like feeling like, okay, like, but I'm like, no, like, with that same work ethic from the farm and that same athletic mentality and the same like drive that I've always had, I was like, I'm doing this, and this is I'm sticking with this. I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. And it was wonderful. And then, every couple of weeks, and again, it was learning the tools and working with somebody to give me those tools to then be able to navigate and to learn life and to go forward and learn, like I said, learn how to be a sober functioning adult. So that was, I think it's been 6.5 or almost 7 years since I've been sober from everything else. But yeah, and then ever since, I've just been trying to continue to learn and continue to grow. I stopped doing therapy when I left Canada, but I've recently started doing it again, just because
It's good.
I need to. I want to check in. I spend so much time in the gym and making like physical health my priority. I was like, I want to, check in mentally. And I got a great recommendation from another friend, and it's nice. It's wonderful just to have a educated, non-biased third party who can sit there and listen and help you see things from different perspectives that you potentially haven't, or to give you advice or direction on things,
Keep you honest with yourself.
and keep you honest with yourself. Exactly. So that's kind of my story. There's a lot of little stories within there, a lot of nuances, a lot of other kind of stuff, but that's kind of the general story of what I've been through and why I'm sitting here today, because I want to talk about it and to drop the stigma of what those things look like.
Well, I want to talk to you about one thing that you brought up, because as you were talking, I was thinking, I'm reading this really interesting book right now. It's by an author. Her name is, I'll show it to you on the screen. Her name is Caitlin Moran, and she's a feminist. And she wrote about women exclusively until people started asking her in 2014, what about men? And she started like joking and saying, men are fine. What do I need to talk about men? I'm not the expert. And then she started, realizing that maybe men do need to have someone talk about them and address some of their issues. And you said, one of your biggest hesitations for going to therapy was it wasn't manly.
Totally.
Right? It's something wimpy. There's something wimpy about dealing with your feelings. Do you think that being a man makes it harder for you to tune into your feelings and ask for help?
I think it still does. Honestly, I think it still does. I think I've come a long way, and I'm very in touch with my feelings and my emotions, and I'm a very empathetic person by nature. But I do still think it does. Absolutely. I often, one of the biggest things when I was going through all my things was the exterior looked. Everybody saw there's Johnathan, the model, there, everything. And I always liken it to my Jeep. I have a Jeep that I love and I've always taken really good care of. And when I was going through all my stuff, I was spending my money on drugs, but the outside was always shiny and perfect and the tires were shined perfectly. But on the inside, the engine was falling apart and everything was, and I felt like that as a person, where on the exterior, everybody's like, man, look at he's in such great shape and he can lift that and he's, but on the inside, I felt like I was broken. But coming to today, where I do think it still does, there is the stigma but I'm getting a lot better at it, where I can talk to, like I said, I'm still going to therapy, but I can talk to friends and say like, man, I'm going through such and such and it sucks, or just today's one of those days. And man, it's not. So I think it's getting better, but I still think there is a bit of that too. And at my age, being 41, mental health wasn't talked about. And I didn't know what anxiety was when I was first diagnosed with it. I thought I was just going crazy. I'd never heard anxiety and I'd never heard depression and stuff like that. And my parents didn't, they were the best at, putting on a brave face and just charging forward. And I think, there's part of that as well. And that's why I love how it's becoming more of a conversation and why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to help, so like I said, drop that stigma, because I can go to the gym and I can bench 300 pounds. I'm 6'2". I can skate circles around whoever. But you know what? I have tough days, and I've had dealt with an eating disorder. I've been sexually assaulted. I'm a recovering alcoholic, recovering drug addict, and I need help sometimes. And I have feelings, and sometimes they don't feel great. And I want to be able to put that forward. So I'm hoping that that's being dropped. But I still know it's a very real stigma, and it's a very real thing that is going on.
And now let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. Since I was a kid, I've loved watching movies. As a psychiatrist, I'm blown away by how film touches us at our core, deepens our self-knowledge, and can improve the human condition. I wanted to let listeners know that I've started a new podcast called Real Mental with Dr. Marcia Sirota. I'm going to be talking with film and TV experts to help people figure out their lives by getting to the truth about mental health on the big and small screen. Some recent films covered are Turning Red, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Asteroid City. Please subscribe to Real Mental on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I want to talk about the sexual assault. I don't want to get into the particulars because that's not necessary, but I just want to talk to you about it because, there's a lot of talk about women and being sexually assaulted and the Me Too movement and all the really great work that's been done, but there's not very much talk about men being sexually assaulted and how that makes them feel. One of my girlfriends is a psychologist, and she ran for several years a group for men who had experienced sexual abuse and sexual assault. And, it was very enlightening to her to be running that group because of the things that her participants were sharing. But, I wanted to talk to you today about kind of what kinds of things were going through your mind, if any, because I know you were doing your very best to push them away, which is understandable, but what kinds of things were going through your mind afterwards, like after this man assaulted you? Like, what did it make you think and feel? Because I think that's an important thing to share with our listeners, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so much was going through my mind. Like, first of all, I wouldn't dare tell my agency because I didn't want to get blacklisted in Miami. I didn't want to be known as a troublemaker or a problem. And that's how I saw it, first of all, is like, if I say something about this, then this is going to affect me professionally. Then the shame. Like I said, I'm a very, I'm a person who's stood up for myself and others all throughout my life. And in that moment, I was just so, I was just so shocked by what was going on. And then, the hindsight, I should have done this, I should have kicked his ass, I should have done, I should have, like, all that kind of stuff. And then the confusion. This is 2010 and I was 28 years old and sexuality wasn't really talked about as much. And it was like, well, a man's touched me down there now. Does that mean I'm gay? Like, those kinds of questions. And whereas now it's like, well, no, of course not. But that wasn't so. And then the shame and, those were, and I could never tell anybody about this. I could talk about my alcohol, I could talk about my drugs, but I could never tell anybody about this because of all those things, because of what I should have done, but
did you blame yourself at all? Did you say, if I had gone in there like with different clothing, or if I had gone in there with a different attitude, did you ever like feel like you had done something to deserve it?
Not really. No, because that's the thing. It's like I was really put in a position that I shouldn't have been. And in going to this person's house for a go-see by myself at 8:30 at night, I hadn't even found a place to live yet. So I'm living in hotels. And it's like I said, it's 8:30 at night. I was told this guy's notoriously a bit of a creep. He's a swimwear and underwear designer. So I'm going in and out of his bathroom, coming out in, Speedos and stuff like that. So I was put in a position where I shouldn't have been in that position in the first place.
Yeah.
Like I should not have been put in that position in the first place. But it was my first major US market. Here I am. I've got to make this work. So no, I thankfully didn't blame myself for that. But I did blame myself for my reaction. But now, like I said, at the time, I'm glad I didn't react physically because I don't know if or when I would have stopped hitting this person. And I just got out of there. And a thing that I've learned, this is fairly recently, is forgiveness and forgiveness towards myself. And I forgive myself for the choices that I've made with regards to, choosing alcohol as a coping mechanism, choosing drugs and stuff like that. You know what? I was doing my best with what I had at the time. And yeah, in hindsight, they weren't great ideas, but I was trying and I didn't know what else to do. I was alone. I was trying. But I also forgive myself for the things that have happened to me that are out of my control, like my mom passing away very suddenly and like the sexual assault, because those things are unfortunate facts and they have happened, but they're out of my control. And I forgive myself and I forgive that situation. I don't forgive the person who did it. I don't even know. I don't remember his name, to be honest. I've done such a good job at compartmentalizing and putting that away that if I brushed shoulders with him on the street, I wouldn't know. But like I said, that forgiveness of that. And that's why the sexual assault and eating disorder, I said I would never tell anybody because I'll be looked at like a wimp, like all those,
back to being manly, right? Back to having to be manly.
Exactly. All of those derogatory terms, all those things. But I was like, you know what? No, that doesn't define who I am. That doesn't change the person that I am. Like the way that I treat everybody else and the way that I, respect others and I respect myself, that doesn't change me. If anything, there are other people out there that need to hear that. And selfishly, this has been extremely helpful for me because I've been carrying this luggage of this shame of these things for years, and they were the no-go zone. There are still things in my life that I've gone through that I'm not talking about publicly, and I'm not ready to talk about publicly. And Maybe I won't. Some of it has to do with my family. It's not just my story to
But
tell.
but you're also entitled to your privacy, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. But I was like, you know what? These are real things. And like I said, these are real things that men and women and people, just society goes through. These are societal issues.
Yeah,
And
I was
it's
actually
helpful.
yeah, I was actually thinking that, what would have been a good reaction when this guy is, assaulting you in his home at 8:30 at night, and you're, he's in a position of such power and you're not, like, what
That's
would
it.
have been a good response? I think the only thing that you could do is what you did, which was get out of there, right?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
right. Like, if you wanted to keep working in the business, what could you have done? So I think you did the best you could have under the circumstances. I wanted to kind of segue a little bit, but staying on the theme of being a manly guy,
Mhm.
because I was also thinking, so here you are, you're in fitness, you're a model, and it's a lot about your appearance, about your fitness level, your how muscular you are. You know, I in the same book that I've been reading, they're talking a lot about how men these days, a very large proportion of young men have a real problem with their appearance. They think they're too fat, they think their bodies aren't right, they think their bodies are not, good enough, and they become depressed, sometimes even suicidal about the way their bodies look. And Ms. Moran was talking about how, in the 80s, when the first action figures would come out, let's say for Star Wars, Han Solo and Luke Skywalker had kind of average guy bodies, dad
Yeah.
bods. Now
Yeah.
the Luke Skywalker figure has, huge ripped pecs. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
He's like a superhero. And Mark Hamill, the actor, certainly doesn't. He's just a regular guy. So
Yeah.
it's like our society puts these expectations on men, and especially young men, of having these bodies that are, very hard to obtain. Some people might be able to with hard work and just good genes. I'm sure you have the combination of both. But, for a lot of people, even if they work really hard, their bodies aren't going to get to the Instagrammable, look. So how do you reconcile being, a model, being a fitness model, portraying yourself in this kind of idealized way? How do you reconcile that with the way that a lot of men are having these problems, with their self-esteem because their bodies don't, quote unquote, measure up?
So that's a great question, and I've gone through a lot of that, like with the body dysmorphia, and I'm my own toughest critic. The one thing that I did and said to myself when I came out of pancreatitis, and having my body fail me from the inside because of what I was putting in, what ingesting my body, is I told myself I will never put anything illegal. I will never take any shortcuts to get anything on the exterior that will compromise my interior. I will never do that. That's a hard line with me. I respect everybody can do what they want with their own bodies, but I think the side effects and the risks involved with them are just too great for me. But that's not to say I haven't struggled continuously throughout the years. The biggest thing that I've learned, and it's taken me a long time to learn, and this is in the gym, this is in modeling, this is just in life, and it's be the best version of you that you can be. And understand that, like you said, we do all have different genetics and we do all have different body types. And, for me, trying to change my body type to be more like, one of my roommates was in South Africa, and going to, drastic measures of over exercising and eating disorder and that kind of stuff, it didn't get me any more work. It made my body look a way that wasn't me. It made me look skeletal because I was a much larger framed person than he was. Sure, I was lean and ripped, but my bones are sticking out, my collarbone, so it's be the best version of yourself and never take shortcuts, because there's always a consequence and repercussion that comes with a shortcut. Dedication, hard work, consistency, holding yourself accountable, those are absolutely the ways to, be the best version of yourself. And understanding that the best version of yourself is pretty great. All that you see on Instagram, and that's another reason why I want to come out here and say that, is all that glitters is not gold. And, there's a lot of editing going on. And there's a lot of, like I said, people taking illegal substances going on and stuff like that. And I don't envy children growing up in this society with that pressure. I mean, we had it a bit with, magazine covers and stuff like that in the 80s and early 90s, but not to the degree that it is now. And it is setting these unrealistic expectations or levels for men and women, but especially for young men, to achieve these things. And I would just say that is you have to be the best version of yourself. And when you are happiest with yourself, knowing that, hey, I've accepted the things about myself that I can't change, and I'm going to work really hard on the things that I can change. And to an extent, like listening to your body and knowing when it's time to rest. And like before, I would just work out every single day. If I was sore, I would take a Advil. I would go in every single day, 3, 4, 5. I've spent 9 hours in the gym a day, like at times, like many times. I spent 9 hours, like just there, just beating myself to death. But be the best version of yourself and don't compare yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy. It really is the thief of joy. And the best thing about each and every one of us is that there's only one of us. That's what makes us, that's what makes the world such a beautiful place and makes everybody so unique and wonderful. And really embrace that, really, like, I love how we're seeing a much different spectrum and scope of models nowadays, and like seeing that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes, and and all kinds of things. And I really do, and I do really do appreciate that, and in seeing that.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is that maybe, like your journey is also saying to maybe pay a little bit more attention to the insides and a little less to the outsides. Although you are a model
Absolutely.
and and a fitness person, what you're really saying is that your life got better when you started paying attention to your insides, to your feelings, and to your inner
100%.
health, and not so much to the outsides, to the shiny gloss on the surface, but to what's really going on in the inside. And I think that for young people today, so many of us are looking at Instagram and then focusing on, how can I look better, right, on the outside, when maybe we all need to pay more attention to how do I feel? How is my well-being? Am I taking care of myself? How are my relationships? How is my, how are my goals? How are my values? What are my principles? What are my dreams and my hopes and my wishes? If we focus more on the insides, I think we would be so much happier. If instead of saying I'm beautiful and well built, we could say I'm kind and I'm well connected.
Yes.
So I think
Yes.
that,
100%.
your message, I think is a lot about that as well, right? Your life really started to improve when you paid attention, you went inward, right?
You're absolutely right. Because like I said, I was walking around and I was appearing a certain way, like the magazine cover guy. And I've been on many magazine covers, but on the inside, I was broken. Up here, I felt broken. I felt like I would never be living a normal life, like ever again. Like I felt like that was it. It's mind, body, and spirit. And I think absolutely you cannot ignore one of those. They have to go together. They have to be symbiotic. And you have to really, and it is inside out. And one thing I will give myself credit for is even throughout all my trials and tribulations of alcoholism and all that kind of stuff, I've always taken my vitamins, and I've always been very aware and conscious conscious about getting all my nutrients. And I have always eaten healthy. Yes, I had an eating disorder, and I would do that as well. But when I wasn't doing that, I was eating very healthy. I'm a big believer in you have to live your life though. If you go to a great restaurant and they have a chocolate lava cake, like, man, pass me a spoon. I am the first one in there. I'm not depriving myself of things. But you're absolutely right. It is from the inside out. And I learned when I was traveling is a very humbling experience for me. So when I was in my alcoholism, I was in a smaller town outside of Toronto. And, I bought a house when I was young. I had a couple cars. I thought I was the king of that town. I'm young. And as I traveled, everywhere I went, there were just tens of millions of people who were trying to live their lives. And it made me realize what a small part of this whole thing I am. A significant part, but I'm just a small part of it. And everybody deserves your respect. That whether it's the person who delivers your food, your parents, people you work for, somebody you meet on the street, everybody deserves your respect unconditionally. And I don't think muscles, bank accounts, cars, job titles, any of that puts anybody anywhere different than we're all just trying to do our best. You don't know who's having those days. Like the day when I found out my mom died, I did not understand why the world had not stopped. Shut the highways down, close McDonald's, my life, how are you guys still moving around here? You don't know who's having those days or what people are going through. So we need to lead with grace and respect and really treat people that way. And again, I don't care how big your muscles are. I don't care what coverage you've been on. I don't care how many zeros are in your bank account. I don't care how fast your car goes. Doesn't mean anything to me. How do you treat other people? How do you, project yourself into the world as a kind human being to others? That's what I think is really most important.
I totally agree. And I get sad when I think about, like you said, this younger generation who, everything is about, look what I have. And if you just spend this money, you could have what I have, and then you could be happy. The problem is all these platforms are there to get people to spend money, to feel bad about themselves, and then to spend more money, as opposed to
Exactly.
have to be given tools to feel better about themselves by being better people, by being kinder, more thoughtful, more connected, more socially active, more responsible human beings. So, it makes me nervous about our future because we are so focused on these superficial material things, and young people aren't voting. They're not engaged in politics. They say, oh, that has nothing to do with me. And that has everything to do with our future. One government versus another has completely different effects on our lives. So I'm hoping that, more stories like yours can help people, especially young people, see that our priorities are incorrect and we need to look more inward about, toward the things that really matter. It's wonderful to have the career you're having, but if you were just focused on your appearance, I wouldn't be talking to you today, because that wouldn't be an inspiring story, right? The inspiration is your inner journey.
Yep, absolutely, and I appreciate that very much. And I will say, like, when I was young, let's say when I was 18 years old, I was very, very lucky that my parents bought me a very nice car for my first car. And if you asked me the most important thing in my life when I was 18 years old, I would have said my car. And then my mom died. And I've gone through life and I've realized that these are just things. It's great to work towards something and to enjoy and whatever, but they're just things. And those are not what's really important. Like the connections with people and the experiences and stuff like that. And that's why, like, when I see like people at concerts and they're just looking through their phone, it's like, be in the moment. Like, man, you're not going to go back and look at that and feel the same way you did when you were there and you saw your favorite band up there doing their thing. You're just not going to. And it's more often than not, it's to put on Instagram to show people that they were there and you weren't. And it's like, it's that push and pull of like trying to get people to understand that. But then you see a lot of young influencers and stuff like that who are being rewarded for living that lifestyle. And then, it's like, well, I'm 19 years old. Why don't I have a Lamborghini? So yeah, that's absolutely a massive thing, is to try and to separate that and to really understand that's the legacy you're going to leave behind. It's not like, not to get dark or anything, but at your funeral, they're not going to be talking about the laundry list of assets you have. And that's going to be the legacy of, it's who you were as a person and how you touched people's lives and, who you were from day to day and the things that really matter and the things that are, that matter the most to me are non-tangible things, because everything else is replaceable. I have a few mementos from my mom that I keep in my safe that are very important to me. Obviously, they have, they mean the world to me, but everything else is just stuff. Everything else is just stuff, and we need to focus less on stuff and more on, like you said, just working on learning the tools to navigate this life. I mean, even as adults, we're bombarded by these things. They're selling us stuff, and it's like, how did I end up with that? Like, geez, like, again, I've known and dated and interacted with some colleagues who, male and female, are absolutely stunningly gorgeous people, and some of them are just down to earth, wonderful, just really genuinely good people. And then there are some people, and this is just society, this isn't just modeling, some of them are really ugly people on the inside, and you see the way that they treat other people, you see the way that they look down on other people, and your physical attractiveness means nothing to me. I would much rather spend my time, I've been on set with people like that, and I'll go over and stand with the photographer's second assistant and talk about his dog and just sit there. And I'd rather spend my time doing that, having a real connection with somebody, than to sit there with this person who is so enthralled and so in love with themselves. I always say it's very important to love yourself, but don't be in love with yourself. And I think there's so much of that happening these days where everybody's in love with themselves.
Yeah,
And
there's a difference between
but there's that line.
Yeah, there's a difference between self-love and narcissism. And self-love
Big
includes
time.
other people, because when you love yourself, it overflows out and you can love others. When you are in love with
Yeah.
yourself, it's exclusive. You can't love anyone else. So yeah, we want to have
Yes.
self-love
Yes.
that overflows outward, but we don't want to be narcissists and
Absolutely.
exclude others from
Oh,
our love.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. When I was miserable and I was in those depths of my alcoholism and all those things, I wanted to bring everybody down to my level. Misery loves company. So I was putting out that energy to bring people down to my level. My life is not all sunshine and rainbows now, but I'm operating at a much healthier, happier, more balanced place. And I just want to have great conversations and help to lift somebody's day and to lift my own day. I mean, one of my favorite things is having just a nice, pleasant, just casual, it could be a brief interaction with a cashier at a grocery store. Hey, how's your day going so far? Oh, good. What time do you get off? Oh, okay, great. Well, hey, I hope you have a great weekend. I love that kind of like just, and they're a stranger, but there's no such thing as a nobody in my life. And I really have a problem with somebody who, like, people who talk about people as nobodies. And whether it's, again, the things you have or the money or the whatever, there's no such thing as a nobody. Everybody is a somebody. And everybody is somebody's, child and somebody's sibling or somebody, whatever. Everybody is somebody. And I think that is super important. And yeah, the more that we can have those conversations and we can treat each other that way, I think it's just too important, too important.
That's wonderful.
I love talking to somebody else like who feels the same way. And I love it. It just makes me so happy.
Yeah, of course, because yeah, the real stuff makes you happy and the other stuff makes you feel empty. And we have this kind of mental confusion where we think that more of the wrong solution will eventually turn into the right solution. So more drugs, more alcohol, more binge purge, or
Right.
whatever. But more of the wrong
Right.
solution is
More
just more
shopping,
suffering.
more.
Exactly, more shopping, more showing off on Instagram. But none of it makes us happy, because a little bit of the right thing, just having a meaningful conversation, either with me today or with a stranger at the grocery store, that makes you happy. So a little bit of the right thing makes you feel joy, and a whole lot of the wrong thing never does the trick. So yeah, I agree with you.
No, absolutely. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Jim Carrey. I'm sure it's been said a number of times, but he said something like, "I wish everybody was given $1 million so you can see that, it doesn't get rid of all your problems. It's not all it's not the be all end all. It doesn't solve all of your problems and stuff like that. Like that's not the important stuff. It's what you said."
Yeah, the insides. Well, listen, Johnathan, it's been wonderful talking with you. So I'm going to ask you the 3 questions I always ask everyone at the end. And the first question
Right.
is, if people want to find out about all the things that you're doing, where will they look for you?
So I'm big on social media. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok. My Instagram handle is just my first and last name, Johnathan Niziol, and that obviously will be in the description. I also have a YouTube channel under the same name. I have a website that I just went live. It's Johnathan Niziol Official, and people can connect with me. And I love connecting with people and learning from people because, again, I don't feel like I have it all figured out. So I love interacting with people and learning so much from people and hearing from their experiences and stuff like that. So yeah, those would be the top places that you could find me.
Wonderful. And
All of my links to my links to my email, all that stuff it's all on there. It's all connected.
wonderful. And do you have a current project that's kind of your pet project right now?
So right now, this is my focus, getting my story out there. Once I decided, okay, it's time to lower my guard and to really like be honest and to put this out here. This is really what I'm most focused on right now. I'm still modeling, obviously, and doing real estate and training clients, but this is a big part of it. And I really am excited and passionate about doing this and speaking with people like yourself and having these conversations and I'm working towards a book that's coming down the line, working towards my own podcast that's coming down the line. But in the meantime, it's, a lot of Instagram content and TikTok content and YouTube stuff where, I'm talking about the things that we've talked about and just, in shorter form and some long form and stuff like that. So this, talking about what I've been through in hopes of connecting with one person and also for myself to continue to learn is definitely the biggest project that I'm working on right now and the most passionate.
Wonderful. And my third question and final is, do you have a call to action for the listener today?
I do. And it would be, regardless of your sex, I think if you're feeling some kind of a way and you have things that are on your heart or on your mind, and just go see a medical professional. Go speak to somebody like yourself. Go talk to somebody and find out what's going on. Don't wait as long as I did and distract yourself with Instagram or substances or whatever. Go and seek out medical attention or speak to a medical professional and find out what's going on with you, and be aware of and cautious of, I'm not a preachy non-drinker. I think everybody can do as they please. If people can drink and keep it in control, I'm like, hey man, live your life. That's awesome. Like, by all means, just be aware of if it becomes a necessity. And that's when it switches from like, hey, it's a good time to, man, I can't, it has to be 4:00 already because I need that drink, but I would for sure say therapy, talking to somebody, maybe finding out if you're dealing with something like anxiety or there's, you need to be medicated or something like that, or take a daily medication, whatever it is. I would say go do that. Don't wait as long as I did. And don't worry about the stigmas attached to it. And find the right person too, because that's a really big thing too, is finding the right connection and the person that communicates the same, and you can get a lot from, and you can learn a lot from too. And sometimes it takes a couple tries, but I've been lucky and I'm 2 for 2 on great therapists. But yeah, go out there and just the same way we try and take care of our bodies, take care of our minds and our souls and spirits and whatever that means to you, take care of the insides.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Johnathan Niziol, for coming on the Ruthless Compassion podcast today. It was really great talking with you, and good luck on your ongoing journey.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful speaking to you as well. And I like I said before, I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and to speak with you. And it's made my day.
This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.